The wind had turned cold, sharp enough to bite through even the thickest camouflage. She lay motionless in the hollow of a ruined wall, her rifle resting on her forearm like a promise. The battlefield around her was a fractured landscape of smoke and silence, broken only by the distant thunder of artillery. And she was alone, completely, terrifyingly alone, while the fate of the entire front line depended on a single shot. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're rewatching from. I love knowing who's listening. Her name was Anya Volkov, and the soldiers whispered it like a myth. Some called her a legend, others called her a ghost. To her, the name didn't matter. What mattered was the weight of the mission, the sound of her own breath, the steady pulse in her wrist that reminded her she was still alive. The sun was sinking behind the shattered skyline, painting the air in bruised purple and gold. Dust hung in the atmosphere like a memory that refused to fade. Every movement was amplified, every building leaf falling, every gear shifting, every distant footstep. The battlefield was a giant predator, and Anya was its prey. Behind her, the last of her squad had been cut down by an ambush that came from nowhere. The radio had gone dead. The commander's voice had vanished into static. Her teammates were gone, leaving only the echo of their last orders and the bitter taste of grief. Anya's fingers tightened around the rifle. She could have run. She could have tried to regroup. But she knew the truth. Running would only delay the inevitable. The enemy had a supply line moving through the valley below, and if it reached the front, thousands would die. Her commanders had sent her out alone for one reason. She was the only one who could do what needed to be done. The moral weight of that decision sat heavy in her chest. She thought of her family back home, of the small kitchen where her mother had once taught her to bake bread, of the way her father's hands had trembled when he said goodbye. She had joined the fight to protect them. Now, alone on this ruined land, she wondered if protection had a price too high to pay. A faint sound drifted up from the Valia low hum, like a swarm of insects. The supply convoy was moving. Anya's breath slowed, her eyes narrowing. Her training kicked in, a silent rhythm of focus. She began to track the enemy's movement with the patience of a hunter. Her scope captured the first vehicle, then the second, then the third. Trucks lined up like a line of ants, moving with mechanical certainty. She could see the faces of the enemy soldiers through the haze, unaware of the danger watching from above. The convoy was protected by a small unit of guards, their rifles pointed outward. Their posture relaxed because they assumed no one was watching. They were wrong. Anya adjusted her position, moving with the careful precision of someone who had lived on the edge of death long enough to understand its language. Her heart beat slower. Mind became quiet. She was no longer a woman alone on a battlefield. She was a force of nature, but the moral tension remained. She knew what would happen if she fired. The convoy would stop. The enemy would scatter. But they would also respond. Reinforcements would arrive. She could be surrounded, cut off, and killed. And if she failed, the supply line would continue. Thousands of lives would be lost. She was alone. She was tired. She was afraid, but she was not defeated. She placed the rifle against her shoulder and stared through the scope. Her finger hovered over the trigger, trembling just slightly. The wind shifted. Dust rose from the valley floor, carrying the scent of oil and smoke. A bird screamed in the distance, a reminder that life continued even here. Anya took a breath and fired. The shot rang out, sharp and decisive. The sound cut through the valley like a blade. The first truck erupted into flame, metal twisting in a sudden burst of heat. The convoy jolted, chaos rippling through it. The guards shouted. Soldiers scattered, their voices rising into the air like panicked birds. Anya didn't move. She didn't celebrate. She simply waited, listening. The enemy began to respond with precision. Machine guns opened fire from hidden positions, their tracers streaking through the smoke. The ground shook. A second vehicle exploded, then a third, then a fourth. The valley became a storm of fire and metal, but the supply line was severed. The front line miles away would now have a chance. Anya watched as the enemy's panic turned into order. They began to regroup to search for the sniper who had struck like a ghost. Her radio crackled to life for the first time in hours. "Anya," a voice said, trembling with disbelief. "Do you copy?" She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sound anchor her. "I copy," she replied. There was a pause, and then the voice said, "You just changed the battle. You just saved us." Anya's throat tightened. The weight of the moment pressed down on her again. She thought of the men she'd lost. She thought of the faces of soldiers who would now live because of one shot. She wondered if that made her a hero or just a survivor. The radio crackled again. "You need to fall back. Reinforcements are coming." Anya looked around the battlefield. The smoke hung low, the air thick with heat and grief. The enemy would come looking for her. She could feel it in the tremor of the earth. She was alone. She was vulnerable. But she wasn't afraid. She moved, slow and steady, like a shadow slipping through ruins. Her boots left barely a mark. Her breath was silent. She vanished into the landscape, leaving behind the echoes of a war that had just shifted on its axis. Hours later, when the dust finally settled and the sun rose, the soldiers at the front line heard the news. A legendary sniper had turned the tide of battle with one hunt. They didn't know her name. They didn't know her face. But they knew her impact. And somewhere, far from the battlefield, a woman who had once baked bread with her mother sat in silence, thinking of the war and the cost of saving others. Because courage isn't loud, it's the quiet decision to act when no one is watching. Sometimes one shot is all it takes to change everything. If this story moved you, share your thoughts below. Subscribe to Whispered Words and stay with us, because the bravest legends are the ones born in silence.